Man, she was sloppy, and she left a trail of herself and her movements everywhere. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of David Nixon. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you are new to the channel, I tell 3 true crime stories every single week here on YouTube on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for sure. I may pepper in some other ones from time to time, including YouTube Shorts. I'm more known probably over on TikTok, where I have around 3 million-ish or so followers, where I tell at least 1 or 2 true crime stories in short form every single day. So if you want to follow that, you don't have to, but you can. The link is listed in the link tree of the description of this video below. The link will also pop up here at some point in the beginning and also at the end. And then also in the link tree below, you'll see my merch store. We sell like t-shirts and hoodies. We ship all over this entire planet, so check it out. Again, if you want to, you don't gotta, but you can. If there's a case you want me to cover, just email me. My email is also listed below. Email me the name of the case, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to the list. I pick my cases at random, so I can't promise you when I'll cover that particular case, but it will happen at some point eventually. And actually, lastly, the quality of these more recent videos may look a little less than normal because my camera, for some reason that I normally film with, is not cooperating with me. Something is wrong with the audio. I thought it was my mic. It's not the mic. It's something to do with the camera. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, but we got this on my phone for right now, at least. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, that was weird and awkward. But let's get into today's case. David Roy Nixon was born on March 9th, 1962. He was born and raised in New Hampshire, but eventually, by the time this particular case occurs, he's living in Grapevine, Texas. Yeehaw! Don't do that ever again. You got it. David, again, by the time this case occurs, had been married previously twice, divorced twice, and was currently dating a woman. He brokered deals on houses, and he was super successful at that. There is a quote about him that basically states that he could sell a screen door to someone on a submarine. That is how good of like a salesperson he was. Throughout the 1990s, he was a big deal in this particular field. He had advertisements everywhere, and he was making a lot of good money. Good money? Is there such thing as bad money? Well, I guess it could have been drugs. So yeah, good money. I mean, we're talking like he's brokering $1 million deals. So he's doing well for himself. During one of his marriages, he did end up having a child. He had a son, and that was the only child he had. His son, I believe, was born in about 1991. After his second marriage ended, he would end up at some party where he would meet a woman named Tracy Frame. Apparently, she was a bookkeeper somewhere. She worked in accounting. David was like instantly smitten with her. She had, she was beautiful, and he said she had these piercing crystal green eyes that he just fell in love with. And the two of them, he and Tracy Frame, would end up getting a home in Grapevine, Texas. From multiple witnesses, David and Tracy's relationship always appeared to be fun. And it always appeared to be that they were super loving towards each other. They were a popular couple. They would mingle and go out to parties all the time together. However, after some time, they started to have arguments, especially when it came to money. It's always about money, which is kind of unbelievable because David really lavished her with a lot of great gifts. He bought her a freaking Lexus. She had her own black Lexus. He had a white Lexus. He took her on cruises around the world. But according to, I think, one of the ex-wives of him, Tracy did not like the fact that he was giving so much money as child support for his child. It sounded like she would rather that money be spent on her. And then David makes a mistake. So apparently he is, at the time, around the time this case happens, he is about $100,000 in debt. And this debt is to the IRS. He doesn't want to lose his house. And so what he does is he signs the house over to Tracy Frame, his girlfriend. And then their relationship becomes more tumultuous. It becomes worse. There's more fighting. There's more arguing. And then it sounds like there was a plan to break up. And if that was the case, Tracy, the house would be hers because he put it in her name. It was April of 2002 where David calls 911 to say his girlfriend locked him out of the house and she changed all of the locks. The police came. There was obviously an argument between David and Tracy, but eventually the argument was simmered and she allowed David back in the house. Tracy did not want to give up this house. This was her house now, in her mind. On April 20th, 2002, David Nixon was supposed to have dinner with his son, who at this point is now 10 years old. His ex-wife, Donna, would end up calling 911 after she couldn't reach him and also couldn't reach Tracy. She was concerned because this wasn't like David. David was a really loving father. He always showed up for his son. And so this was just beyond bizarre. The last time anyone can say they actually laid eyes on David and saw him was a couple of days prior to the report of him disappearing. It was on April 18th, 2002. On the day he was reported missing on April 22nd, the police got another phone call with regards to a fire. When the fire was put out, the source would shock everyone. It was a body. It was a human body of an adult. This was literally just 3 hours after Donna had called 911 to report him missing. And at first, police thought this was very strange just because she reports him missing and then they find his body on fire. You know, they were like, did she set up this phone call to make it look like she was innocent, or was she guilty of something? They weren't really sure at first. So the body was found just like on the street next to a drainage ditch, and it had been wrapped in this blue blanket. And when they opened up the blanket, they found these like metal wires kind of everywhere. And they thought that was strange because blankets don't have metal in them unless it's a heating blanket. And that's when they determined that the blanket he was wrapped in was in fact a heating blanket, but the plug was missing. Gasoline had been poured on his body and on the blanket and then was lit on fire. And it looked like this person had tried to shove the body in that little drainage ditch, which is it's too small for a person to fit through. This isn't freaking Pennywise and, Georgie at the drainage ditch here. It would have to take dental records to actually formally identify the body as belonging to David Nixon. David was 40 years old at the time. They were able to determine that David Nixon, his cause of death was a single gunshot wound to his head. And I believe it was to the back of his head. At first, police would go to the house that he lived in and they searched the home and they didn't see anything all that unusual. They didn't see like any blood spatter. They didn't see a sign of a struggle. They didn't find an actual crime scene in this house. Everything seemed to be relatively clean and in order. The one thing that did stand out, they found out that Tracy had actually literally just purchased a new mattress for their bedroom. Like the day he would have been killed or the day afterwards, that's when she bought this new mattress and completely disposed the other one, and they never found it. They thought that was strange, because it is strange. But the first person they really zoned in on in terms of who had a motive was actually his ex-wife, Donna, the mother of his child. And this is because his son was the beneficiary to a $500,000 life insurance policy, which then in turn would have essentially been handled by Donna. But they couldn't find any evidence or proof that she had anything to do with this, and I think they even alibied her and discovered that there was just no way she could have done anything to David. Near the body, when his body was found, they found tire tracks in the mud. The tire tracks were kind of strange to police because it looked as if the tracks were made by the same vehicle, but the tracks themselves looked different from one another, as if there were different tires on the same vehicle. It seemed like the tracks came from something like a big truck, maybe like a moving truck or something like that. So they look into that aspect, and lo and behold, Tracy Frame, she got a moving truck. she had rented a Penske moving vehicle. And I believe there were witnesses who stated that they saw a Penske moving vehicle in the driveway of their home around the time that he would have likely been murdered. Then they find David Nixon's white Lexus parked in the parking lot of a Tom Thumb grocery store. So police go to the grocery store and ask them, hey, do you have surveillance footage? Do you have CCTV stuff? And they said, yep, we absolutely do. And so they look up the footage. And what they find is just a bunch of evidence of someone literally dropping off. They see when the person pulls in and drops off the white Lexus. The person gets out of the car and then begins walking towards the right. And then they are seen getting into a black Lexus and then driving away from the parking lot. Well, they also find video footage of a Penske moving truck also coming into the parking lot. And this all lines up because Tracy, her car is a black Lexus. David's car was a white Lexus. And then they have this proof that she purchased or rented a moving truck by Penske. But they also found footage of Tracy entering the store itself during one of these trips. She goes in there to buy a bunch of cleaner stuff and muriatic acid. And she bought like a lot of it. They get footage of her walking into the store. They have footage from her actually purchasing the items. They see her on camera. They confirm it's her making these purchases. She even used her loyalty card, which they confirmed with the timestamps. Like, she was everywhere on camera. It's believed she parked the Penske truck there for some time, so she didn't have it in the driveway for too long of a time to raise some red flags in neighbors' eyes, but she still had it at the house for enough time that people noticed it. They bring in Tracy Frame just to question her at first. And the thing is when they found his body, she had not been informed of that. But when she goes into police, at first, they tell her they have found David deceased, but they don't say anything about the circumstances by it. She hadn't known yet because this all was happening very quickly. And she asked the question, well, how did you even identify him? They hadn't told her his body was burned. They hadn't mentioned it at all yet. So then they inform her of like how he was found, how had been shot. And then they go into their evidence finding where they find all the footage and the Penske truck and all that. Because at that point, once she kind of raised some eyebrows with some of her statements from the moment they informed her of his death, they really wanted to look at her a lot. So they're interviewing several people close to David, including both of his ex-wives and other, colleagues and stuff. And it turns out Tracy Frame had told multiple stories to people with regards to why or how David is missing. One of her stories was he left on his own accord and he'll be back. One person, she said, I don't even know where he is. I have no idea. Then she gave like specific locations of where he was, but never the same story to all these people. Like, she's an idiot. I'm sorry, but she's an idiot. Tracy then tries to tell police that David Nixon was kind of a monster because she said that she had gotten pregnant and that he had essentially forced her to get an abortion when she didn't want to. And then she would end up telling friends sometime later that she had a miscarriage because David pushed her down some stairs. But then she would later confess to those friends that she lied about that and that she did end up getting an abortion. Her diary, she had written several things about this, how she had a lot of resentment towards David for asking her to get an abortion. And so there may have been motives there as well of like just not, she felt angry about this. But in the end, they never found proof that he like forced her against her will. It was more of we need to have an abortion here because, we can't have a child in this particular relationship. It wasn't like you put a gun to her head and say, get an abortion. She did it. She didn't have to do it, but she did it. Tracy, by so many different witnesses' accounts, was such a demanding person. She expected a lot in terms of gifts and money. She wanted to be showered with everything, with all these expensive gifts and stuff by David. She was materialistic, and she did not allow David to really ever have friends once they became involved. Anytime a friend would try to hang out with David, she just wouldn't let it happen. She would argue with them. She would say, you can't hang out with them. You need to hang out with me. Me. It's always me you got to be with. So he ended up losing friends. And it got to a point where this relationship just wasn't working. And there were indications, there were signs, there was evidence that he was working on purchasing a new home and secretly getting furniture to move into that home to just be completely done with her. Police asked her, well, why did you get a Penske truck then? And she said, oh, it was just to move things to like a Goodwill store, just some things from the house. She never went to Goodwill. They never found any evidence on camera footage or anything that she ever entered the Goodwill she said she went to, or any Goodwill. Goodwill keeps records of their donations and the things that she said she donated. All these Goodwill stores had no records of it whatsoever. They also brought in cadaver dogs, and they had the cadaver dogs, look for scents. They found the dog would hint that the trunk of Tracy's car hinted towards like human remains. Another piece of evidence they found was the control device for a heating blanket. But the heating blanket, police could not find anywhere. When police researched the control, what blanket this belonged to, they would find out it belonged to that exact blanket that he was found wrapped up in. So they know that he was wrapped up in a blanket from his home, meaning he was killed in his home, more than likely. And then they found out about the mattress purchase. And so they came to this conclusion that she must have shot David in the back of his head while he was asleep. They found out that they had recently purchased a gun for the house, but after this murder, the gun was never found. It's just so much was stacking up against her, but she just kept denying it, and she kept pushing blame on other people. She's like, look at the other ex-wives. They had financial motives, or one of them did. Police did find out that, I think it was his second wife, their marriage ended kind of badly, and it got to a point where he got a restraining order against her. But in the end, it all kind of just sort of worked out, and there was never any violence between the two of them. The crime scene investigators, even after spraying luminol, couldn't find any blood or signs that acid or bleach was used in the house to clean, and so they couldn't confirm the crime scene was the house. But everything pointed to Tracy, that she had to have done it in that house, and it could have only been her. They've been able to rule out everybody else, but they can't rule out Tracy. The woman seen on the camera at the supermarket, literally dropping off. I mean, they have this person dropping off his white Lexus exactly in the spot where it was later found. Then that person walking to a black Lexus and pulling away. What are the odds of somebody else having a black Lexus that also killed him and left his car? Why would that person have access to the keys to his car? She confirmed herself she rented the Penske truck. She dropped the Penske truck off at the same parking lot near where she left his car. She was sloppy. She was so bad at all of this. And she was just caught red-handed. She was charged with his murder anyway. And at trial, her defense team tried to say that Tracy was a sweet, nice, kind person. She was so loving and she couldn't hurt a fly. David was this controlling monster of a person. But everyone would say actually that was really more Tracy. There were witnesses say, that's not David. That was Tracy who was the monstrous, controlling person who wanted to basically puppet his life and not allow him to do anything with his friends or anything. He had to give her everything, all of his time, all of the stuff like gifts and money. And then she found out that he was planning to just cut her off. And so she acted. They do believe that Tracy Frame acted alone in this. They could not find any evidence that she had help. Tracy has a much smaller frame, and David was kind of a bigger guy. So what they think she did was, because the Penske truck came with a dolly. They think that she shot him in the bed. She then got the truck. She brought the dolly into the house and laid it on the bed, and either pulled his body over with the blanket he was wrapped in, or somehow got him onto that dolly so that she could easily wheel him off and then into the truck. But I don't know why there would have been human remains scent found in her car trunk. I'm not sure if she maybe left bloody items back there at some point. And maybe that's why the dogs picked up on it. They tried to paint Tracy as a good person, but all of the evidence, physical evidence, video evidence, witness testimonies was just so overwhelmingly against her. There were at least one other person who could have had a motive, but that person was cleared completely. So the only other person with a genuine motive was Tracy, because she was about to lose her money bag, right? So she figured that if he was dead, she gets to stay in this house because it's in her name, and he won't be able to dispute it. It was March of 2005 when the jury deliberated, and they came back and they decided that Tracy Frame was guilty of the murder of David Nixon. She was convicted of first-degree murder, and so she was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. However, to this day, to my knowledge, she still remains locked up in a prison cell. She did try to appeal her conviction back in 2006, but she lost. If she continues to lose appeals and she never gets paroled, she will be released when she is 74 years old. To me, it sounds like she did it. She was the guilty party. She killed him, and she is exactly where she deserves to be. And thankfully, because she was so sloppy at covering up her crime, David Nixon got the justice he rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case, True Crime and Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please subscribe, give this video a like, follow me over on TikTok if you want to, check out the merch store, and recommend a case to my email address if you want to. What is that? I don't know. Bushaka, lakata, hueha. If you're new here, that may have confused you. All of the people who've been subscribed to me for this past year and a half or so, I mean, they know what that was. They know, obviously, but I'll not explain it to you now because, yeah. Boop. I have no idea what I'm doing.